The Arizona Territory in the summer of 1882 was a land of contradictions, where ancient Apache traditions collided with the inexorable advance of American settlement, creating tensions that could explode into violence with little warning. In the small frontier town of Willow Creek, nestled in a valley where the crying river wound its way through red rock formations, 12-year-old Emily Rose Henderson had become an unlikely symbol of hope in a place where hope was often in short. Supply Emily was the daughter of Samuel Henderson, the town's only blacksmith, and Martha Henderson, who had died the previous winter from consumption, leaving behind a husband struggling to raise a sensitive, intelligent daughter in one of the harshest environments on the frontier. Emily had inherited her mother's gentle nature and her father's stubborn determination, creating a combination that both worried and amazed the residents of Willow Creek. Since her mother's death, Emily had developed a daily ritual that both puzzled and concerned the townspeople. Every morning at sunrise, she would walk to the banks of the crying river, so named for the mournful sound the wind made as it passed through the rock formations along its course, and place fresh wildflowers she had gathered on a flat boulder that jutted into the water. The ritual had begun simply enough. In her grief over losing her mother, Emily had started leaving flowers at her mother's grave, but as spring turned to summer, she had begun extending her offerings to the river itself. When asked why, Emily would only say that the river seemed sad and that flowers might help it feel better. Her father, Samuel, allowed the harmless ritual to continue, understanding that his daughter was processing her grief in her own way. What? Emily didn't know, and what would have terrified the residents of Willow Creek if they had understood it, was that her daily flower offerings were being observed. From across the river, hidden among the cottonwoods and red rocks, Apache scouts had been watching the young white girl who brought gifts to the water that their people considered sacred. The crying river was more than just a water source to the local Apache bands. It was a spiritual place where their ancestors had communed with the spirits of the earth and sky. The river's mournful song was believed to be the voices of those who had passed into the spirit world, and the Apache traditionally left offerings of their own at the sacred boulder where Emily now placed her flowers. For months, the Apache had watched this unprecedented behavior from a white settler. Children of the white eyes typically showed no respect for the sacred places of the Apache people. Yet here was a young girl who seemed to understand, without being taught, that the river deserved honor and remembrance. 2 hawks flying. A war. Chief of the band that controlled this portion of the territory had been studying the situation with growing interest. His warriors were restless, pushed by encroaching settlements and diminishing hunting grounds toward a war footing that could result in bloodshed throughout the region. But the daily sight of the young white girl honoring the sacred river had given him pause. She brings flowers like our grandmothers brought corn pollen, observed Stone Bear, one of 2 hawks flying's most trusted scouts. She speaks to the water as if she knows it has a spirit. Perhaps the spirits are testing us, 2 hawks flying mused. Perhaps they are showing us that not all white eyes are enemies of the sacred places. The delicate balance that Emily's innocent ritual had created was about to be shattered by forces beyond anyone's control. Word had reached Willow Creek that a detachment of cavalry from Fort Davidson was riding toward their settlement, pursuing a band of Apache raiders who had attacked a supply wagon train 50 miles to the east. The soldiers were led by Captain Marcus Brennan, a man whose hatred of all Apache had been forged in the aftermath of his family's death in an earlier raid. Captain Brennan was not known for his subtlety or his understanding of Apache culture. His approach to dealing with the Indian problem was simple and brutal. Any Apache found on land claimed by white settlers would be treated as an enemy combatant, regardless of their actual intentions or actions. The approaching confrontation would test not only the fragile peace that existed along the crying river, but also the spiritual significance that both cultures placed on the sacred waters. Emily's flowers, meant as simple gestures of comfort and remembrance, had unknowingly created a bridge between two worlds that were otherwise separated by centuries of misunderstanding and conflict. On the evening before the cavalry's arrival, Emily made her way to the river as usual, unaware that her innocent ritual was being observed with greater intensity than ever before. Two Hawks Flying himself had come to witness the young girl's offering, bringing with him several of his senior warriors, who had requested to see the white child who honored the sacred water god as Emily knelt beside the boulder and arranged her daily bouquet of desert lupins and Indian paintbrush. She felt an unusual sense of being watched. The feeling was so strong that she looked around carefully, scanning the opposite bank of the river where shadows were gathering in the approaching twilight. For just a moment, she thought she saw movement among the cottonwoods, a glimpse of brown skin and dark hair that could have been Apache scouts. But when she looked more carefully, there was nothing visible except the natural patterns of light and shadow created by the setting sun. What Emily didn't see was two Hawks Flying stepping closer to the water's edge, studying her with the intensity of a leader trying to read signs that might determine the fate of his people. The war chief was a man caught between the demands of warriors who wanted to fight and his own growing conviction that the spirits were sending a message through this young white girl's respectful behavior. "Tomorrow the horse soldiers come," Stone Bear whispered. "They will bring war to the sacred places." "Yes," Two Hawks Flying replied quietly. "But tonight the flower girl comes in peace. Perhaps the spirits are showing us a different path than the one that leads only to blood." As Emily finished arranging her flowers and whispered a soft prayer for her mother's spirit and for the sad river that seemed to carry so much sorrow, she had no idea that her simple act of kindness was being interpreted as a potential sign of hope by the Apache war chief who would soon face the most difficult decision of his leadership. The next morning would bring challenges that would test everyone's understanding of courage, honor, and the possibility of peace between peoples who seemed destined for conflict. Emily's flowers had created a moment of connection across cultural boundaries. But whether that connection could survive the approaching storm of military force and racial hatred remained to be seen. Subscribe to our channel to discover what happens when the cavalry arrives and how a young girl's simple act of kindness might be the key to preventing a massacre. The truth will amaze you. Emily Rose Henderson woke before sunrise on the morning that would change not only her life, but the delicate balance of power along the crying river. As she prepared to make her daily journey to leave flowers by the sacred boulder, she had no idea that during the night, Two Hawks Flying had made a decision that would bring his entire war party to the riverbank in a show of force unlike anything the small settlement of Willow Creek had ever witnessed. The Apache war chief had spent the dark hours in council with his senior warriors, weighing the approaching threat of Captain Brennan's cavalry against the strange message he believed the spirits had sent through the young white girl's flower offerings. By dawn, he had reached a conclusion that surprised even his most trusted advisors. "We will meet the horse soldiers at the sacred river," Two Hawks Flying announced to his assembled warriors. "But we will not hide like rabbits in the brush. We will show them that Apache strength protects the sacred places, and we will see if the flower girl's spirit speaks louder than the cavalry's guns." As Emily made her way through the pre-dawn darkness toward the river, carrying her daily bouquet of wildflowers, she became aware of sounds that didn't belong to the peaceful morning routine she had established over the past months. The rhythmic splash of paddles cutting through water, the soft scrape of wooden canoes against the rocky shore, and voices speaking in the Apache language that she didn't understand, but somehow didn't fear. When Emily crested the small rise that overlooked her favorite spot on the crying river, she stopped in wonder rather than terror. Lined along the opposite shore were more than 20 Apache war canoes their occupants painted for battle and armed with rifles, bows, and traditional weapons. It was a sight that should have sent her running back to town in panic, but something about the scene held her in place. At the center of the line of canoes stood two hawks flying, his imposing figure unmistakable, even at a distance. The war chief was watching Emily with an intensity that she could feel across the water, but there was no hostility in his gaze, only a kind of expectant curiosity, as if he were waiting to see what she would do. Emily looked down at the flowers in her hands, then at the boulder where she had left offerings every morning for months. The presence of the Apache war party should have terrified her, but instead, she felt a strange sense of rightness, as if this meeting had been inevitable from the moment she first began honoring the river. Slowly, deliberately, Emily walked to a boulder and knelt beside it as she had done every morning since her mother's death. She arranged her flowers carefully, whispering her usual prayer for her mother's spirit, and adding a new request that the river might help bring peace between all the people who lived along its banks. As Emily completed her ritual, two hawks flying did something that astonished his warriors and would have shocked the residents of Willow Creek if they had witnessed it. The war chief stepped forward in his canoe and spoke across the water in clear English. "Flower girl," he called, his voice carrying easily across the river in the still morning air. "You honor the sacred water as our grandmothers did. Why do you bring gifts to the spirits of the Apache?" Emily looked up, meeting the war chief's eyes across the water with a directness that impressed the Apache warriors. "I don't know about Apache spirits," she replied honestly. "I just know the river sounds sad, and flowers make sad things feel better. My mama always said kindness was never wasted." Two hawks flying translated Emily's words for his warriors, and a murmur of approval passed through the assembled war party. Here was a white child who understood respect for sacred places without being taught, who offered kindness without expecting anything in return. "Your mother was wise," Two hawks flying replied. "The river carries the voices of those who have gone to the spirit world. Your flowers honor their memory." The remarkable conversation between the Apache war chief and the 12-year-old white girl might have continued, but the sound of approaching hoofbeats from the direction of Willow Creek announced the arrival of Captain Brennan's cavalry patrol. Emily turned to see a dust cloud rising from the trail that led to town, and she realized that the peaceful morning was about to become something far more dangerous. "Horse soldiers come," Two hawks flying called across the water. "You should go to safety, flower girl. What happens next is not for children to see." But Emily didn't move from her position beside the boulder. Something in the war chief's tone and the way his warriors had received her explanation about the flowers made her believe that she might be the only person who could prevent the bloodshed that seemed inevitable when the cavalry arrived. "Please don't fight," Emily called across the water. "The soldiers are just doing their job, and you're just protecting your sacred places. Maybe there's a way for everyone to be safe." Captain Brennan's cavalry patrol appeared at the river's edge just as Emily finished speaking, and the captain's reaction to seeing a young white girl apparently in conversation with a war party of Apache was immediate and violent. "Henderson!" Captain Brennan roared, recognizing Emily from his previous visits to Willow Creek. "Get away from those savages immediately. All units, prepare to engage the enemy." The 20 cavalry soldiers began spreading out along the riverbank, their rifles trained on the Apache war canoes. The situation was escalating rapidly toward a battle that would likely result in Emily being caught in the crossfire between two forces that had no reason to trust each other. Two hawks flying watched the cavalry deployment with the experienced eye of a war chief who had fought similar battles before. His warriors were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of mobility on the water and intimate knowledge of the terrain. More importantly, they had the spiritual authority of defending a sacred place from desecration. Captain Brennan, Emily called out, turning to face the soldier who was preparing to order an attack. "Please don't shoot. They're not hurting anyone. They're just here because this river is special to them." "Miss Henderson, you don't understand what you're dealing with," Captain Brennan replied, his voice tight with the strain of the confrontation. "These are hostile Apache warriors, and they're armed and dangerous. You need to move away from me. Water immediately." But Emily remained where she was, standing beside the boulder where she had left flowers every morning, positioned now between two forces that seemed determined to fight. Her small figure, silhouetted against the morning light reflecting off the crying river, had become the focal point of a confrontation that could determine the fate of everyone present. 2. Hawks Flying realized that the flower girl was trying to prevent bloodshed by placing herself in danger, and her courage impressed him more than anything else she had done. Here was a white child who was willing to risk her life to prevent war between peoples she barely understood. "Horse Soldier Chief," 2 Hawks Flying called across the water to Captain Brennan. "The flower girl speaks wisdom. We have come to protect the sacred water, not to make war on children. Perhaps there is a path that does not require blood." The unprecedented moment of communication between the Apache war chief and the cavalry captain, mediated by a 12-year-old girl who had no understanding of the historical forces at play, created a pause in the escalating conflict. For a few heartbeats, the possibility of peace hung in the air like morning mist above the crying river. Don't miss the incredible conclusion where Emily's courage and wisdom help forge an understanding between two cultures on the brink of war. Subscribe now to see how innocence and kindness can triumph over hatred and fear. The standoff at the crying river had reached a critical moment where any sudden movement or harsh word could trigger a battle that would echo through the history of the Arizona Territory. Emily Rose Henderson stood between two armed forces, her small figure somehow commanding the attention of both the Apache war party and the U.S. cavalry patrol as she tried to find words that might prevent bloodshed. Captain Brennan's military training told him to eliminate the Apache threat immediately. But something about the young girl's position and the unusual nature of the confrontation gave him pause. In his years of fighting Apache raids, he had never encountered a situation where a white child appeared to be communicating peacefully with a war chief. "Miss Henderson," Captain Brennan called out, his voice carefully controlled, "can you tell me what these Apache want? Why are they here in such numbers?" Emily looked across the water at 2 Hawks Flying, then back at the captain. "They say this river is sacred to them, like a church. They're not here to hurt anyone. They're here because they're upset that people might not respect their holy place." 2 Hawks Flying was impressed by the girl's simple but accurate explanation. She had grasped the essential truth of the situation, without understanding the complex history of conflict between Apache and white settlers. "The flower girl speaks truly," 2 Hawks Flying called across the water. "For many moons, she has honored the sacred water with gifts of flowers. She understands what most white eyes do not, that some places are holy and must be treated with respect." Captain Brennan studied the scene more carefully, noting that despite being armed and painted for war, the Apache warriors had made no aggressive moves. Their canoes remained in formation on the water, positioned defensively rather than for attack. "Chief," Captain Brennan addressed 2 Hawks Flying directly, something he had rarely done in his military career, "my orders are to pursue Apache raiders who attacked a supply train. Are any of your warriors responsible for that attack?" 2 Hawks Flying conferred briefly with his senior warriors before responding. "The young men who raided your wagon train are not of our band. They are angry warriors who follow no chief and respect no sacred places. We pursue them also, for their violence brings dishonor to all Apache." This revelation changed the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Instead of facing the Apache raiders he had been pursuing, Captain Brennan had encountered a different band, That was apparently also opposed to the rogue warriors. Emily sensed an opportunity in the conversation between the two leaders. Captain Brennan, if they're both looking for the same bad men, maybe they could help each other instead of fighting. The suggestion was so simple and logical that it cut through years of military doctrine and racial prejudice. Two hawks flying recognized the wisdom in the flower girl's words and saw a possibility he hadn't considered. The young men we both seek have dishonored the sacred places and brought death to innocent people, Two hawks flying said. Perhaps horse soldiers and Apache warriors could ride together to stop them before they bring more shame upon all our peoples. Captain Brennan found himself considering an alliance that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. He was facing a situation where cooperation might achieve his mission more effectively than conflict. If you're willing to help us track down these raiders, Captain Brennan said carefully, and if you can guarantee the safety of settlements in this area, perhaps we can work together temporarily. Emily felt a surge of hope as she watched the two leaders negotiate a possible peace. Her daily ritual of leaving flowers by the river had somehow created a moment where understanding could triumph over hatred. There's something else, Emily sighed, looking directly at Two Hawks Flying. I want to learn more about why this river is sacred to your people. My mama always said we should respect other people's beliefs, and I'd like to understand yours better. Two Hawks Flying was moved by the girl's request. In all his dealings with white settlers, none had ever expressed genuine interest in Apache spiritual beliefs. If peace can be made between our peoples, Two Hawks Flying replied, you would be welcome to learn the old stories about the crying river. Perhaps understanding can grow from the seeds of respect you have planted with your flowers. Over the next hour, as the morning sun climbed higher above the Arizona landscape, an unprecedented alliance was forged beside the crying river. Captain Brennan's cavalry and Two Hawks Flying's warriors would combine their tracking abilities to pursue the rogue Apache raiders who had been terrorizing the territory. More importantly, Emily's innocent ritual of leaving flowers had created a bridge of understanding between two cultures that had previously known only conflict. Her daily offerings had demonstrated that respect for sacred places could transcend racial and cultural boundaries. The joint expedition succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. The combined Apache and cavalry forces tracked down the rogue raiders. Within 3 days, capturing them without a single casualty among the pursuing forces. The cooperation between traditional enemies proved so effective that it became a model for future interactions in the territory. For Emily, the experience led to a unique education in Apache culture and history. Two Hawks Flying, true to his word, taught her the sacred stories of the crying river and the spiritual significance of the flowers she had been leaving. She learned that her instinctive understanding of the river's sadness had aligned perfectly with Apache beliefs about the spirits that dwelt in the sacred waters. The friendship that developed between Emily and the Apache band became legendary. Throughout the Arizona territory, she learned their language, participated in appropriate cultural ceremonies, and served as an unofficial interpreter and mediator in dealings between her settlement and the Apache people. Years later, when Emily Rose Henderson had grown into a woman who devoted her life to promoting understanding between Native American tribes and white settlers, she would look back on that morning at the crying river as the moment when she learned that small acts of kindness could create changes far beyond anything she had imagined. The flowers she had left beside the sacred boulder hadn't just honored the spirits of the dead, they had planted seeds of peace that would grow into understanding between peoples who had seemed destined for eternal conflict. Her simple ritual, born from grief and continued out of compassion, had proven that respect and kindness could build bridges across any divide. Two Hawks Flying, who became a lifelong friend and teacher, often reminded Emily that the spirits had chosen her to carry a message of peace, because children's hearts were pure enough to understand truths that adults often couldn't see. The war. Canoes that had lined the shore at dawn had come not to make war, but to protect a sacred place where a young white girl had unknowingly demonstrated the respect that could make peace possible. The crying river continued to flow through the red rocks of Arizona, but its mournful song was joined by stories of hope and understanding that proved that even in the harsh frontier, human kindness could overcome fear and hatred. Emily's flowers had indeed made the sad river feel better, not by changing its ancient song, but by giving it new meaning as a place where different peoples could come together in respect and peace. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey of understanding, peace, and the power of simple kindness to bridge any divide. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories that prove love and respect can overcome any conflict.